Okay, so uh, there's very few of us who did not see last night's debate. And there was one moment in particular that I actually think is worth seeing over and over and over again. And it has to do with Tulsi confronting Kamala. Now, if you've ever seen my channel, my content before, I am not a fan of Harris. I'm a big fan of Gabbard because I agree with her on a lot of international issues. I'm anti war. And she went in on Harris. So I'm going to play the clip and then I'll speak after it.
Special
I want to
agents
bring
in
in
the state of
Congresswoman.
California, and I'm proud of that
I
work.
want to bring in Congresswoman Gabbard. Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about reentering former offenders and getting them counseling. It is why, and because I know that criminal justice system is so broken, that I am an advocate for what we need to do to not only decriminalize, but legalize marijuana in the United States.
I want to bring Congresswoman Gabbard back in. Your response,
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you are in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Senator Harris.
My entire career, I have been personally opposed to the death penalty, and that has never changed. And I dare anybody who is in a position to make that decision, to face the people I have faced, to say, I will not seek the death penalty. That is my background. That is my work. I am proud of it. I think you can judge people by when they are under fire, and it's not about some fancy opinion on a stage, but when they're in the position to actually make a decision, what do they do? When I was in the position of having to decide whether or not to seek a death penalty on cases I prosecuted, I made a very difficult decision that was not popular to not seek the death penalty. History shows that, and I am proud of those decisions.
Senator Harris, thank you very much.
Okay, so you see the part where she mentions the 15,000 people that Harris, put in prison. Also, the cheap labor that was put in place by Harris via keeping prisoners past their sentencing, or rather past the release dates. And when you hear those things, I want you to take note of the fact that Harris doesn't outright deny them, that she doesn't go and say, hey, that's not true. I actually, I don't know, fought to get them out, so something like that. And, the reason I say this is because I've complimented Harris before, even as someone that's not a fan of hers, as being one of the more sophisticated politicians I've seen over the last 2 years. I've been aware of her, prior to that, as she was my attorney general, because I'm in California. But I was saying that when you look at her support for, or at least her giving lip service to the idea of, ending the drug war and legalizing marijuana. I don't know if she's explicitly said she wanted to end the drug war, but you have to understand that oftentimes when people are talking about Biden, what do they go to? Oh, he wrote this crime bill that put all these people away. And you ask those same people, and this is not the totality of progressives or the group that I identify with, but I find it so disturbing that when you have people online who are talking about their support for a candidate or not, they'll often say, "Oh, well, I really like this one person, and they're great, they're wonderful." But then you ask them, "Do you know the full extent of this person's record?" Because I've actually had this happen where I've spoken with people who claim to be supporters of certain candidates, and then you mention their record to them, and they act so confused. And this goes back to what I was saying, which is that as someone who is not supporting of either party, I identify as progressive. I don't think Democrats give any more, on average, of a damn about uh, the broken criminal justice system the Republicans do. And that extends to voters. I mean, when you see Biden, the guy who all these people have such a problem with as it relates to, uh, you know, policies relating to the criminal justice system, polling at the highest number out of anybody, and then following right behind him is some uh, crappy attorney general whose tenure was only most notable for locking up and perpetuating that same system. They're a joke. And there's this like weird thing that people have where they try to see, this is how this works. You're going to see people on Twitter and on YouTube and other places that are part of the I guess the more centrist wing or whatever, saying, "Oh, you shouldn't criticize the Democrat, you shouldn't critique them, and Gabbard was wrong for doing that," and wham. But I guarantee you they won't have anything to say. And I wish I could pull this clip up, but it unfortunately no one seems to have caught it during the well, I don't even need to use Harris as an example, because her one of her campaign workers called Gabbard the cheerleader of Assad after the Gabbard came out and said that that Harris basically just made the accusation at Biden, or used their first debate performance as leverage to get like a cheap shot basically. Yeah, called a veteran who fought in the military or who participated in the military, something I would never do, because the U.S. military doesn't care about its veterans, much less regular, other people who aren't enrolled. But that's another story. But she calls this veteran, a person who voluntarily signed up to get involved in these banana wars overseas, a cheerleader for a foreign government, just because she doesn't want to go and have a war with them. Like that's insane. And anyone who supports someone and they say, I want the drug war to end. I believe that the criminal justice system needs to change. I think that we've been too tough in our policies relating to people. If any person can say they want some kind of structural change to that particular part of U.S. policy, whether it's statewide or nationwide, and then they back Harris, who, let's recount, supported truancy, locking up parents because their children wouldn't go to school, allowed these 15,000 people to go to jail for marijuana usage, laughed about it, meaning that she didn't take it as a serious thing, allow people to stay in prison past their sentences for cheap labor for my state. If you can support someone with that record and claim you support changing the system, or that you believe that we need to fix things as it relates to this issue, you're talking to both sides of your neck. It would be like if I said, let's give you an example. I call myself a Trump supporter, which I'm not, but we're just using this as an example. And I say, I am so opposed to interventions and foreign entanglements, and get all of these different conflicts that we're involved in, whether it's the war in Afghanistan, the Saudi-led coalition, in Yemen, where we kill 85,000 children, just stuff like that. If I were to look at his record, which has been to continue every single one of the 7 wars that he inherited from Obama, and if you don't believe me, I can list them all right now: Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Somalia. We can go down the list. But the point is, if I were to look at these countries that he is bombing, just as his predecessor did, and say I am a supporter of his, that means one of two things: either I don't really care as much about screwing with these random countries as much as I say I do, or I'm talking out of both sides of my neck. And that's why I've said that there's a serious problem with the way politics is structured. I've talked about Gabbard, not necessarily in videos with her name in it, but I've mentioned her a couple of times on the channel because I pay attention to people in Congress who are anti-war. People like Thomas Massey or Justin Amash, or before he died, Walter Jones, Ro Khanna. And that's not because I have some special love for those politicians, but because I like what they stand for. They're different from the rest in actually being consistent and being against these foreign interventions, regardless of what side they're on. And with Democratic voters, they seem to have this thing where, like, they'll literally look past any horrible blemish on someone's record because they think the person was smart or because they have a D next to their name. And you don't have to take me at my word. I guarantee you, if you polled voters in the Democratic Party, how many of you think that there's institutional racism, and how many of you think that the system needs to be changed to, better accommodate communities of color? I guarantee you it would probably be 70, 80, 90% that come back and say, yeah, we need to fix this. But then they're over here backing some former attorney general that literally pursued keeping the status quo. And if they're not backing her, we go the other front runner with the weird record. They're going after a guy who, in 36 years as a senator and in 8 years as a vice president, was known for doing the exact same thing. That's why you had Booker mention he was, talking about how great his crime bill was up until 2015. So, when I speak about being disenfranchised with parties and hating this, like, group think thing when it comes to what people support or what side they're on, it's because of stuff like this. I don't support those policies, which means I don't support those politicians, which means a very significant portion of people who, call themselves part of that party, I'm not on the side of, just by default. So in conclusion, and before we wrap this up, Gabbard actually spoke about her positions on this a lot more intimately at the She the People forum. I can send someone a link if they want to see that. Again, if you want to see it, leave a comment. If you don't, and I would include that here, but I don't want to, turn this into some giant clip show. It's really disturbing that you actually have people who don't see a problem with the way things are set. And I've said before that with me, it's not about trying to make, because I've disclosed only 3 candidates that participated in these debates I would vote for are Sanders, Gabbard, Yang, and I guess maybe you could throw in Warren, but whatever. The point is that I'm not seeking to make people vote for someone else or back another person, but you've got to understand that Gabbard gets very little attention as far as, like, interviews, or if she is interviewed, it's smear questions like the Syria nonsense. And I think if she's allowed to be challenged over that issue in a, admittedly messed up, screwed up way, then Harris should have her exact same comments and past said of her as well. And we're not sleazy. Those of us on the actual left, the progressives, we're not as sleazy as a lot of these establishment networks. So we're not going to go and say, why didn't you tell people you supported 15,000 marijuana individuals going to prison? Or why didn't you tell us that you were an advocate of the war on drugs? We're not trying to, make it sound that way. We're just saying that she has a record that it seems like a lot of these Democratic voters tend to completely pretend doesn't, like, they either don't know about it or they just don't care. It's the same thing when I heard that Obama had like a 60% approval rating, as well as the younger Bush. Like, what the hell? It's like, this is the only country in the world you can kill thousands of people for no reason, or rather, I'm sorry, because they live on foreign soil, and automatically that makes them evil. And like, when you come back, people will suck you off. Like, they'll love you for it. It's crazy. It's outrageous. Like, what's wrong with people? And that's why I really do understand why Gabbard is polling so bad, because like these people don't want to get out of these wars. They don't want to actually end these conflicts. Sure, a lot of them say they do and they talk a good game, but they're not serious about that. They would love to stay. You know, we've been in Afghanistan since I was 3. They would love to stay there until I'm 300. Like they have no problem with their money being wasted. Like guys, I guarantee you. Let's pretend Harris is like we can see into the future and she wins. I guarantee you, if they were to put up her single payer healthcare proposal, which is trash compared to Sanders, but whatever, I guarantee you, if they put hers up and there is Democratic opposition to it, what are they going to say? We can't afford this. What are the Republicans going to say? We can't afford this. Uh, but is she going to say, well, how the hell did you guys have over 700 billion military budgets if you don't have the money for this? Like, where's that going to? How do you keep affording that? She's not going to say, she's going to go, well, I guess we can't do it. Time to keep the ACA and stitch that up, because she's an empty suit. She doesn't fight for anything. That's why the guys, her entire career as a public figure has been to go along and get along. Gabbard resigned her seat from the DNC 4 years ago to endorse Sanders, and ever since then has been smeared as a Syria lover, a Assad lover rather. Like I guarantee you poll people, not even like 2% of Americans care about if someone likes the president of Syria. Hell, it should only be 2% of them that like Obama or any of these other warmonger clowns or criminal justice supportive high. Like, God, I really sometimes I wish that I could just like have a one of those little forms or something, because I would love to just outright say there's no difference if you go back 2-3 years ago and cut out Harris's rhetoric and saying that I backed this marijuana bill with it, there would be no difference between her and Barr, Trump's attorney general, the one that served under the older Bush. There'd be no difference, because he also supports having a increase in mass incarceration, the death penalty. These are things that she backed. Marijuana never being legalized. All of this is stuff that is identical in position. And that's why I tell these idiots there's no difference between the two parties. And as long as we continue to accept these Johnny come latelys to the right positions, there never will be. So I'm going to post the link to Tulsi's website. You can donate to her. $1 will get her into the next debate. And you really need someone like that to call out establishment hacks, like 2 of the 4 front runners for the Democratic nomination. Gabbard would be doing a lot better off if people actually cared about implementing a serious change, whether it's on an international level or a domestic level. But Americans aren't exactly known for their high intellect. That's why we have the presidents that we have.